Grimm Variations is an anime adaptation of the fairy tales told by the brothers Grimm, but with a dark twist exposing the brutal reality of human nature. If I had to describe Grimm Variations in one word, it is shallow. All my life, the horror genre in anime is so lacking, I often find myself being more scared being chased by a snail. I walked into this one thinking it was either going to be exactly what I wanted, which is a tense, enjoyable mindfuckery whilst keeping me on the edge of my seat, or exactly what I was dreading, being a ton of graphic imagery littered between mindless exposition dumps that even Agatha Christie would struggle to figure out the messages being told. And judging by the title of this video, I think you could understand what I got. Now, because this is an anthology series, I'm going to review each episode one by one, assuming you can follow along to the story being told, because we all had a childhood, right? The first episode was a retelling of Cinderella, where her father remarries to another woman, giving Cinderella a new mum and two stepsisters. But the twist is that Cinderella actually wants two stepsisters as family, and is willing to lower herself to a maid just to please them and show her love. However, just like the Brothers Grimm tale, the stepsisters are hated for making Cinderella do all this. Although Cinderella isn't as innocent as it seems. She carries around a creepy doll who I'm assuming is supposed to be the fairy godmother. But even then, the fairy godmother doesn't approve of her questionable actions. Like, Cinderella will straight up frame the stepsisters for an attack, right? And then immediately take back that accusation. The princess straight up acts weird. And the tension throughout the episode is, why? Because we know who's behind the carnage, but it's only a matter of time before the motivations are revealed and the end game is shown. And unfortunately for this episode, it doesn't really exist. There's nothing more to it other than Cinderella's a psychopath, teehee. It kind of gave me Gone Girl vibes, and anything that reminds me of that disgusting misandrist mess automatically loses points. Either way, Wit Studios' take on Cinderella was genuinely creepy, and was hopefully a sign of the stakes, setting, and spine-tingling portrayals that I oh so badly have been missing in Japanese animation. Final rating, 30 minutes out of 43 minutes. The problems start to come about when we get to the Little Red Riding Hood episode, which honestly is a personification of everything I hate about the horror genre in anime. This one is set in the distant future, where people have cyberpunk attachments to their eyes, which can change what's real and what isn't. However, there is a club known as the Wolves, which hunt down and kill women for their own pleasure in graphic and gory ways. This is all implied in that first scene where our antagonist Grey does exactly that to a woman at the theatre. Which leads me on to my first problem. After the disgustish fetish vor imagery, which I will be complaining about in greater detail, the show literally spends 2 minutes explaining what was perfectly set up just for the guys at the back that weren't listening. I hate it, detest it, when anime treats me like an idiot. You just did a fantastic job of showing, not telling, and now you're gonna dump exposition anyway. Why? But I digress. The other wolves tell Grey that he's having a bit too much fun with hunting, and they tell him to calm down and lay off for a bit. Grey obviously doesn't want to do that, so he goes to a lady who I can only assume is meant to be the grandma, as she is around creatures of nature, which, by the way, is the reason why the wolves do what they do. In a dystopian world where technology has changed our very existence, the only thing that these people are after is something that's real, and the thing that's real is a smell of another person's blood. It's fucked up. It's something you can see in Black Mirror. But I think overall it's something that's believable despite its disgusting nature. The issue is, however, is that there's no other tension or setup that makes me dread the graphic imagery. It's just there for shock value because the plot said so. Even in something like Saw, which gets criticism for the exact same thing, at least the entire time, you're thinking to yourself, oh my god, is he going to win the game? Or, what's John Kramer thinking about this? Which is precisely why that franchise worked for as long as it did. And it's also why it got tiresome. Or you can look at something more plot intensive like Hereditary. Yes, that film too has a lot of shock factor, but every single graphic moment was set up. Charlie's decapitation? Yep, that had setup. You can see people at a party cutting walnuts, and it was revealed that Charlie has a nut allergy. Peter has to drive her to the hospital, and ta-da! Charlie sticks her head out and dies. It's fucking great. The weird cult shit happening at the end, you guessed it. Literally the entire movie, there's demonic shit, character development about the mother's and the grandma's past. Every single shocking scene, every single gory moment in Hereditary was earned. And that is why that film was so respected in 2018, and it still holds up today. This episode has all the gory imagery, but without nearly the setup and tension that is required to actually make those scenes matter. It's like building a sandcastle without water. You can have the sickest idea in the world, but it won't really stick, unless your idea of stick is scarring your audience. But even then it would struggle to do that. This is exactly my problem with horror anime. It has all the imagery, but without nearly the explanation as to why it's so scary, other than some dumb exposition and some throwaway line you blink and you miss it. Final rating, 10 minutes out of 37 minutes. The third episode on Hansel and Gretel is literally an episode of The Promised Neverland. Hansel and Gretel live in a boarding school, but because they misbehave a lot, they get kicked out for the night and have to spend the evening outside of the fence and into the forest. The Witch of the Forest, rather than trying to eat the two of them, is trying to raise all the kids in the boarding school to be like Emma, Ray, and Norman, is the easiest way to explain it. But, just like in The Promised Neverland, not all is what it seems. There's this really mind-blowing plot twist at the end, which actually made me rewatch the show, just so I could spot the Easter eggs that led up to the point. And honestly, it checks out perfectly. You see anime? You can do it. You can write a consistent narrative without boatloads of exposition and having it lead to an emotional climax that works. So why can't you do it when trying to scare people? The show's variation of Hansel and Gretel was the best episode so far, and again, really got my hopes up. Final rating, 35 minutes out of 46 minutes. Speaking of blowing your mind, Wood's retelling of The Elf and the Shoemaker was literally perfect. I needed to watch this one a few times and really think about the message being told, and I think I get it. The struggling shoemaker in this story is a past his prime novelist named N, who is writing a story which gets rejected by Bear editors when he proposes a draft, and it gets roasted by a random girl on the street. From here, he drinks himself to a pulp and wakes up realizing he has finished a draft of a different narrative. N does not remember writing it, but that is his handwriting, and he is familiar with the story. Now, here lies my first bit of confusion that a viewer may have of this story, because you can either interpret it as the elf wrote it, just like in The Elf and the Shoemaker, or it was a narrative that was written under the influence. But either way, the point still stands that it's not really him, because if the elf wrote it, then that's just blatant plagiarism. And if it is because of the booze, are you really as creative as you think you are? Are you a narrative genius if you need performance-enhancing drugs as a way of gaining so-called success? And here's the interesting part. N himself does not like the product that he attaches his name to. The only story he gave the time of day was the very piece of work that was ridiculed, without realizing that because it's so different to what everyone else is used to, there is a lot of work to be done to actually make it connect with readers alike. This is pretty much what I think of anime nowadays. Many shows can't help themselves and have to revert back to the same old, same old. This isn't even a diss on fiction. Think back to a time where you did a hobby that's out of the ordinary. Think back to a time where you pursued a career which is against the so-called 9-to-5 narrative. You're probably going to keep that stuff to yourself because you don't want to be seen as irregular. You want to be seen as normal, accepted by the tribe. So what do you do to gain that validation? You either give it up or you suppress the love for that thing. Awesome story. I'm not going to spoil the rest. You can enjoy the rest for yourself. Final rating, 44 minutes out of 44 minutes. Okay, I'm winging episode 5 because I was writing a review and it was pretty mixed, but I feel like a lot of the negativity I had towards this episode was the fact that I was comparing it to Cowboy Bebop and to anything starring Clint Eastwood. The town musicians of Bremen starts off with Mad Dog, who gets fired from her police duty for catching police corruption, more specifically calling out her boss. Mad Dog meets up with the donkey, whose intro is kicking some people's asses. Strange, seeming as the donkey was an outcast for being too old and useless. But shush, anime, who cares? And they also meet up with the cat, who I can only assume is a prosy, and got fired from being a prosy. Interesting. They then walk for like 1 minute. There's a 1 minute montage as if this is some Yamazaki Studio Ghibli soft world building. Like, bro, you ain't him. You ain't him, G. They arrive to the town of Bremen, which is some old Western style test tube baby village. It is around this place where they bump into the rooster, who warns them of the Wade brothers' presence and anarchy in the village. Our trio, the rooster hasn't joined just yet, enters a pub where the Wade brothers flirt with the penguin, the Neko of the group, and then Donkey beats the piss out of them. There's then a big action sequence where the Wade brothers get sent away from the pub, and just like in the Brothers Grimm novel, they will be back and banging, and it makes for a really fun action sequence. Sure, like I said, there are some anime problems with it, like, why don't you just shoot him? As well as some cliche backstories. Small, cute girl has terrible backstory. Even in the Brothers Grimm novel, the only one who really gets a backstory is the donkey. But nonetheless, I'm only nitpicking because it's not Cowboy Bebop. Let's be real. Final rating, 20 minutes out of 32 minutes. Though undisputedly the worst adaptation was without a shadow of a doubt the 6th episode, Pied Piper of Hamelin. Because let me tell you that this story as a kid gave me nightmares for months. So I was looking forward to shitting bricks over this adaptation. But to my horror, this episode is absolutely nothing like the German folktale, nor does it really know what it was trying to be in the first place. Our main character of the story is a girl called Maria, and she's learning maths? Why would you learn maths from pedophile cuck teacher when you can learn maths from me? Link in the description to my second channel. Sorry, I had to plug it in. Maria is considered very mature for her age and decides that getting married beats being in a classroom. And it is at this point that cuck teacher wants the cooch. Hooded redhead enters the teacher's house at night, where she offers to trade a picture of the outside world, more specifically a picture of a loving couple, in exchange for letting her stay the night. The teacher declines, and the next morning, it is made official that Maria's getting married. The teacher watches Lucas, who is a hench gigachad meathead, and essentially gets cucked, so invites Maria in to nullify the cuckery. By the way, stop me at any time. I am not making this up. Cuck teacher shows Maria the picture that wait a minute. Didn't the teacher already decline the request from the cloaked figure? So how does he have the picture? Maria goes home all happy after looking at what the teacher only describes as softcore pornography. Again, not making this up. Maria goes home where Lucas and his family are over for dinner, right? She basically roasts Lucas for being like kind of a meathead hench guy, but also on that same token says, oh, I don't really mind who I marry. Kind of streets behavior if you asked me. Oh my god, I forgot about that part. Yeah, the next day the cringe cuck teacher basically has a mental breakdown about, no, Maria's not gonna marry elsewhere, he's gonna marry me. And then Maria walks in the room and he acts bare happy and whatnot. Oh, it's so cringe. I almost don't want to finish this review on the episode. The teacher shoots his shot and Maria, being Maria, actually accepts he goes to an older man's house. Streets! Cuck! Where is the resemblance of the children's fairy tale? Where? Now screw this, I'm done. Go watch this episode just so you can see for yourself how cringe it is. The original Pied Piper of Hamelin is a story that A, tells you to always keep your promises, and B, don't fuck with the people that make your world better. Who in this story is meant to represent the people that make your world better? Who is supposed to represent the Pied Piper, the children who get kidnapped, and the mayor? What is supposed to be the moral of this story? If you're some cuck teacher, I'm supposed to root for you. If you're a mature girl out of wedlock, you get to do streets behavior, vroom vroom. What is this story? I don't get it. Yes, the appeal of the original folk tale did scar me a lot as a kid, but it's that scarring that made it so interesting. In 1,000,001 variations, I do not see how you would get to this episode as your take on such a classic story. Final rating, 0 minutes out of 46 minutes. In conclusion, Grimm Variations is a retelling of the fairy tales told by the brothers Grimm, with a modern twist to portray a darker tone. I'm actually fine with some of the inaccuracies in the Grimm story, so long as the changes make sense. Maybe my expectations were all wrong coming into this, because the creators did mess around with other genres, not just horror. But man, I really wanted to feel like I couldn't finish this show, because the writing just makes you want to shit yourself. Especially since the stories told already cover some really messed up themes, that only as an adult you really understand the dark sides of the fairy tale. And yet, they are completely suited to tell children. It is no wonder we recite this folklore 200 years after it was properly written, and I'm probably going to tell my children in the future. So I really think they missed an open goal when interpreting these otherwise innocent stories, but with an emphasis on the more mature parts. Alright, brace yourself, little ranting coming. Why is Another the only scary anime in the world? Why is Another the only horror anime that understands tension, setup, and payoff? Why is Another the only horror anime that actually fucking uses the horror genre that it is labeled as and builds a story around that exact category of media? Why? I am sick to death of the horror genre in anime being so lacking and being horror on a technicality because, ooh, ghouls are so scary, scream, and his hand turns into a parasite, it's so tense. But it's also badass because the fight scenes look cool. Just to clarify these examples, I am not insulting these horror animes. I am insulting the horror in these animes. And what's the worst part about it? The anime community? They just won't give a shit. With so much anime on the market, weebs will happily move on to another show after calling what they just watched either okay or pretty good. The anime community bitched about all isekais being the same, yet when they are fed the same horseshit labeled horror, contaminated with the same problems show after show, they don't bat an eye to it. They rap in Devilman's Crybaby! They fucking rap! Rap! How do you associate the horror genre with rap? How does a so-called horror anime have characters that rap? You never forgave 4Kids for doing the same thing in One Piece, you hypocritical swines. You always call out Western horror flicks for having a comic relief character. How, in God's name, did Violet Evergarden miss out on Anime of the Year over a horror flick with rap? And then when there is original content that challenges the stereotypical anime tropes and dares to go against them, then ew, it's boring and it doesn't lead anywhere. What were they thinking? Overrated! This is precisely why I stopped watching anime. I don't want to associate myself with these test tube babies. I'm going to watch Demon Slayer till the end just for the views. And then I'm going to rewatch the shows that I actually care about. And I may keep my eyes peeled for anything exceptional enough to watch and warrant a video talking about it. But other than that, keep your phony takes, your dumb elf, and your fetish copes to yourself. Oh, but Sammy, we're not all like that. Well then go watch this video as to why hating on these fuckers is so easy. I will see you next week. Bye-bye.